Hello and welcome to today's video. Over the last several weeks and our first 12 videos, we've looked at a bunch of key arguments around how important and life-changing investment and finance are and should be for everyone. I've shown how investing is the most important factor when it comes to wealth and financial freedom. We've looked at how crazy it is, how so few people learn about it and do it, and at how bad this is for millions of people and, perhaps even more importantly, for our society overall. Many of the UK's problems at the moment have a great deal to do with this stuff, including the cost of living crisis, which is something we'll cover in detail in some future videos. We've looked at the idea that pessimists sound smart, but optimists make money, at why so many people fail at the money game, in the main because they never learn enough or, so often, anything at all about it. We've looked at the crucial and poorly understood difference between investing and trading, another reason people so often go wrong, at the problem with financial advice, yet another reason, at the incredible power of compound interest and compounding returns, Einstein's eighth wonder of the world, and most recently, at how to find the money for investment and at some of the key things you should do before you're ready to invest. As I hope you'll agree, I've given you plenty of evidence along the way in each video to support the arguments being made. If you haven't had a chance to watch our first few videos, please do check them out. What we're doing with this YouTube channel is seeking to provide you with a course in effective financial literacy. Those first few videos are the first few lessons in that course, if you like. So if you want to maximize the impact you'll get out of being part of this channel, please do check them out. So, as I said in our last video, we're now moving from the big picture points about how important and life-changing investment should be for everyone to the nuts and bolts of what to actually do. From the why to the how, if you like. And to kick off with all of that, today I wanted to say a few words about the two most important investment accounts a British national needs to think about in order to get your finances sorted. And these are your pension and your ISA or individual savings account. And by the way, for those of you based overseas, although today's video is about two British investment accounts, many countries have similar products and similar tax structures, so the video may still be useful. Many of our future videos will be relevant wherever you are in the world too. So, pensions and ISAs, the key investment accounts. I don't think it's overly controversial to suggest that most people think the whole subject of pensions is incredibly boring. It's a cliche. The words pension and boring are so often found together, and if you Google those two words together, you'll get 10.6 million results. And as a result of that, a 2018 survey found that 72% of employees are not actively engaged with their pension. 28% say they never review their pension arrangements at all, and only 6% considered themselves to be actively engaged with their pension. And similarly, as I've said in some of our previous videos, estimates vary, but somewhere between 90 and 95% of British adults do not have a stocks and shares ISA, which is the other key account for building wealth. I've said it before and I'll say it again, make no bones about it, this is a massive tragedy on so many fronts. It is the main reason that so many people struggle financially and also a big part of why the UK is in such a pickle economically. To me, it is literally ridiculous and something of an outrage that we seem to have accepted this state of affairs as normal. Everybody knows that we're a bit rubbish at finance and investment, but I think too few people connect the dots in terms of realizing that this is one of our most fundamental problems as a society. It is holding us back massively. So for the vast majority of people, the highest probability method for becoming a millionaire is to do a good job with your pension and ISA accounts over a long period of time. And to me, that is far from boring, surely. In a previous video, we looked at the fact that the whole point of investment is that there comes a moment at some stage in your life where you're able to live on your money, or even better, the money you make from your money, rather than the money you make from working. And we showed how this is a realistic aspiration for most people, thanks to the power of compounding and the ability we all have today to benefit from human progress when we invest. This is the whole point of a pension and why it was invented, so millions of people can realistically aspire to spending many years of their lives not having to work. And this is something that 99% of humans who have ever lived in history couldn't even dream of, and one of the greatest inventions of modernity. We also looked at the fact that the whole system is in crisis, and at why this makes it super important to take ownership of this stuff yourself and very dangerous indeed to rely on the government wherever you are. For people based in the UK, your pension and ISA accounts are the most important vehicles for getting your finances sorted and for making sure you're not sleepwalking towards a genuinely impoverished future. So today I wanted to say a few words about them both. The first thing to say is that it's important to understand that pensions and ISAs are just types of investment account. They're not investments themselves. They're just legal structures which allow you to save and invest with very significant tax benefits. All too often over the years, I've run into people who find this all very confusing and think that ISAs and pensions are an investment of some kind in themselves. They're not. They're just a type of account, as I say. And that's the first thing to understand. Once you have these accounts in place, the most important consideration is then which specific investments you're going to make within those accounts, i.e. which investment vehicles or financial assets you choose. Financial assets would include things like shares, bonds, cash, property, commodities, and all those sorts of different things, for example. And these are the things you're going to want to put in your pension and ISA accounts over time. And one final thing worth explaining before we move on is that you can get exposure to all of these financial asset classes by using something called investment funds. And for the majority of private investors, funds are very likely to be the most important financial product you will put into your investment accounts. And this is because a fund allows you to own a large basket of whichever asset class you want exposure to, such as shares, for example. So if you wanted to invest in shares in the stock market, you can buy one fund which will give you exposure to hundreds of companies. You can own the 500 biggest companies in the United States stock market, for example, by buying something called an S&P 500 fund. You can even buy funds which give you exposure to thousands of shares from all over the world in one place. The really great thing about this is that it enables you to put really small amounts of money to work, but still end up spreading your risk across that huge number of shares. This is the power of investment funds and what they can do for your money. They're a fantastic invention which have been around for nearly 200 years, and all too few people understand them properly or make use of them, even after 200 years. We're very lucky in the UK to have tax-efficient investment accounts and fantastic investment products such as funds available to us, which we can access very easily, cheaply, and tax-efficiently. This is not the case in many other parts of the world, even in some relatively advanced countries. We will look in more detail at each of these asset classes, shares, bonds, real estate, commodities, and so on, and at the crucial importance of funds in the near future. For today, however, let's get back to looking at some of the key things to understand about your pension and ISA accounts. In some of our last few videos, we've looked at how to find some money for investment. And once you've done that and worked out how much you can afford to save and invest each month, arguably the most important thing you will then need to do, as a British national at least, is work out how to allocate that money to your pension and ISA accounts. It's important to get the mix of how you use pension and ISA accounts roughly right. The challenge with this, however, is that doing so can be fairly complicated. The right answer, such as there is one, will be a function of a complex cocktail of considerations based on your own personal circumstances, including whether you're employed or self-employed, how much you earn, how close you are to retirement, your attitude to risk, and so on. The other problem here is that the rules governing these sorts of things change fairly often. And this is one of the most challenging elements of producing videos like this one, or indeed my books, the fact that the rules change in terms of retirement age, tax rules, how much you can allocate to these accounts, and so on. Given this reality, and given that the right answer will be a function of your own personal circumstances, as I say, it's hard to be prescriptive about precisely how someone might use their pension versus ISA accounts. What I can do, however, is paint with a reasonably broad brush. And as this video series progresses, I'll try to make the information as evergreen and widely relevant as possible. Many of the fundamental ideas that work for building wealth, which we're going to be looking at, such as making regular investments over many years into a big stock market index fund, or getting the right mix of assets based on your age, are more or less timeless. I can't tell you precisely what to do. First, because as I've explained in a previous video, I can't give you personal financial advice by law because I know nothing about your own personal circumstances, but also because the rules change. This having been said, When working out how to use your pension versus your ISA accounts, there are a number of key things to think about, which I hope you will find helpful. The first of these is tax. Your pension and ISA accounts both have tax benefits, but it's important to understand what they are and how they differ. With a pension, you get a tax benefit on the way in. So that's to say that when you invest money into a pension account, you're basically able to do that out of your gross or pre-tax income. This means that you will effectively be getting some free money from the government whenever you put money to work in a pension. Clearly a very good thing. This is not true of ISA investment. Anything you're able to allocate to an ISA account comes out of your net income after you've already paid tax. So that's a key advantage of investing into a pension over and above investing into an ISA. Set against that, however, when the time comes, you will be taxed on much of the money you take out of your pension. If you manage to get yourself to a point in your 50s or 60s, for example, where you're able to pay yourself a decent income out of your pension, which is a very important goal for all of us, as we've seen, you will pay income tax on this money, just like you do on your salary when you're working. By contrast, any money that you take out of your ISA accounts is not taxed, and this is a key advantage of an ISA. If you do a great job with your ISA accounts over many years, you could find yourself with a large 5, 6, or even 7-figure sum in that account, and you'll be able to take that money out as and when you like without paying any tax. This is a great thing and an advantage of ISAs over pensions. The next important thing to think about when it comes to pensions and ISAs is access to your money. It's important to bear in mind that you will not be able to access any money that goes into your pension until you reach something called the normal minimum pension age. This is currently 55, but will increase to 57 from April 2028 and will very likely increase still further in the years ahead, given the state of the UK economy and our pension system. The fact that you can't touch the money in a pension until you reach that retirement age is clearly great news for maximising the chance that you'll actually have enough to live on by the time you wish to retire, because you can't raid the piggy bank along the way. But it is important to bear this in mind as you decide to allocate whatever you can afford to save and invest each month. You need to be happy that any money you allocate to a pension will be locked up until you hit retirement age, which could, of course, be many years in the future if you're in your 20s or 30s, for example. The third key consideration is contributions from your employer. If you're employed, the other advantage pension investment has over ISAs is that you should receive some sort of contribution from your employer. Between 2012 and 2019, the government implemented something called auto-enrollment. This has forced all employers to arrange and contribute to a pension of some kind for any employee aged 22 or more and earning a minimum of £10,000 a year. And since April 2019, this policy has mandated that employees contribute at least 5% of their salary and employers at least 3%, for a total of 8% of your salary going into a pension. And by the way, as an aside, in Singapore, these numbers are 20% and 17% respectively, for a total of 37% of people's income going into a pension. That's 37% of what you earn being invested in your future, and indeed your nation's future too, which is why Singapore's government investment company Temasek has nearly $400 billion under management. I think it's perhaps worth dwelling on the fact that GDP per capita, so annual income, in Singapore in 2022 was just shy of $83,000 and growing, compared to $46,000 in the UK and shrinking. High rates of investment aren't the only reason that Singapore is kicking our arse economically, but I would suggest that they've certainly had a role to play. Anyway, back to the UK. Many employers, particularly larger companies, have pension schemes which contribute more than that minimum 3%. So if you have a generous employer who's willing to match your contributions to a pension, it's probably a good idea to take advantage of that, given that this is also free money. If you work for a company that will match any contributions you make to your occupational pension account, then it's highly likely to be a good idea that you maximize your contribution to this account. Investment is all about risk versus reward, and it seems highly likely that the fact that you're getting an automatic 100% return from your employer in matching your contributions will be a good thing to do, as long as you're mindful of the point about not being able to access that money until you're in your mid or even late 50s. The other reason you might not want to do this, by the way, and get that free money is if you are planning to start your own business, perhaps. If you're considering the entrepreneurial route, you'll want to have as much money available to you as possible when you start your business. And it probably goes without saying, therefore, that you'll want to ensure you keep the maximum amount of your savings immediately accessible rather than locked up, even if your employer is willing to double contributions to a pension. But unless you foresee a need to get your hands on as much cash as possible in the near future for these sorts of personal reasons, it's almost certainly a good idea to maximize any contributions to a pension which your employer will match. So, with respect to all of this stuff, if you're employed, one key action you might take is to speak to the relevant person at your company who manages or knows about the pension scheme to make sure you understand what your options are. And you'll also want to ensure your pension money is doing the best it can for you in terms of how it is being invested, something you'll hopefully be better placed to do once you've watched the next few videos in this series. If you're self-employed, it's probably a good idea to speak to a financial advisor about these sorts of things. We've already looked at the fact that personalized investment advice is necessarily quite expensive. But if you're self-employed and want to maximize your chances of getting your mix of pension and ISA investment roughly right, you might want to bite the bullet at some point and seek professional advice. The alternative, of course, is to learn enough about such things so that you can work it all out yourself, which will save you the cost of getting advice, but this will take a fair bit of effort. What you decide to do will be a personal choice. So those are three key elements to think about when it comes to thinking about pensions versus ISAs: tax, access to your money, and contributions from your employer. The final thing I'll say before signing off today is that I fully concede there's quite a lot to learn when it comes to this stuff. In today's video, I haven't covered the different kinds of pension, such as the state pension, workplace pension, and then your own private pension, such as something called a SIP or a SAS. I also haven't looked at the different ISAs, which include cash, lifetime, and stocks and shares ISAs. To do this in detail would have made this a very long video indeed. As I said in our last video, money is a long form thing. There is a fair bit to learn. We will cover as much as we can of this stuff as we go along, but that having been said, for what it's worth, I will be including just this kind of detail in the new updated version of my second book, or workbook, Live on Less, Invest the Rest, which we're working to publish as soon as possible. So please watch out for that as the companion text for this video series. In the meantime, however, I'd also highlight that getting this stuff right is a marathon, not a sprint. The key thing is to get to grips with the basics and aim to get things set up and roughly right. You have the whole of your working life to tweak, hone, and improve such things as you go along, but the key thing is to do something to ensure you're building wealth. And I hope you found today's video vaguely useful as another step on that road. For now, if you want to ensure that you're one of the first to see our future videos when they're published, and as we go through these next few steps, please do click the subscribe and bell buttons, and please do share these videos on social media if you share our belief in how important this stuff is. Until next time, I wish you the very best.